How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good buddy out there on the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing well, Jack. It has been a pretty quick flying week going by so far, I would say. I still feel like that Steelers Cowboys game was just last night, and uh, I don't want it to feel that way. I want that to be far in the past. I don't want to think about it much more. So just tells you how this week's been for me. But stoked to be back on here with you, Jack. Happy that it's football season. Happy that we've been able to hop on here and chat, and happy to be back with you today. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. We're kind of hitting our stride with my 8 week old
Mm-hmm.
and getting decent sleep considering she's only 8 weeks old. But my wife went back to work this week, so
Uh,
made things a little more challenging. But we're still living, we're still breathing. We both still have jobs, which I think is a great segue into somebody who does not have a job anymore, and that is Robert Saleh, former head coach of the New York Jets. He was relieved of his duties on Tuesday, or was it Monday?
Monday,
Monday.
Monday,
He was relieved
right
of his
after the game.
duties on Monday by owner Woody Johnson. Really weird the way that whole thing went down. First, it seemed like Saleh was really, really taken by surprise, but then reports came out that going into that game against Minnesota, Woody Johnson had kind of called all the coaches together and given them the ultimatum of like, this is a must win. We are performing not as good as we should be, especially coming out off a loss to Denver, in which they only scored 10 points. So sort of gave that ultimatum. They lost. Then Saleh was pretty surprised that then he got fired, which looking at it, if your owner tells you this is a must win game, you must understand what that means, especially if your job security has been brought up all off season going into the season anyway. So that happens. There were reports that security literally escorted him out of the facility, which seems also really, really bizarre. I didn't see anything that suggested he was refusing to leave, so I don't see why that seemed that important. But anyway, that's where we are. That's where we find ourselves. There's a lot of speculation that this was Aaron Rodgers' decision because Saleh was going to relieve Nathaniel Hackett of his play calling duties. Rodgers has said that he had nothing to do with it, that he and Saleh were on really good terms. He really liked him. He was one of the reasons that he came to the Jets. So there's a lot of like he said, she said about the whole thing. But the facts are the Jets are 2-3. The Jets are 2-3.
Mm-hmm.
They have lost in back-to-back weeks to Minnesota and Denver, and not the Minnesota that was 4-0, but a Minnesota that looked a lot worse. And Sam Darnold did not look like an MVP candidate like he had the first 4 weeks of the year, and they
Mm-hmm.
lost that game. And so here we are, Nick. Like, what are some of your first reactions to all this? How are you feeling? Do you think this was the right call by the Jets? Do you think this was a gross miscalculation of what the right thing to do was? Where are we at here?
Mm-hmm. So, in the wise words of Big Cat, Mike Florio quotes him all the time in this: dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. And the Jets have a proven track record of being a dysfunctional team.
Yeah.
And personally, it seems like to me, it's been pretty evident the last few years that it feels like a year ago, 2 years ago, it felt like Robert Saleh's on the hot seat and people don't have faith in him and that he should be fired then. And so it feels like the moment those feelings of you should fire this head coach, when it feels like the downside's outweighing the upside, that's the moment you should fire them. And that's the moment teams should really cut bait. And it feels like this fish has kind of been stinking for maybe a year too long, where
Mm.
it seems like the marriage with him and Aaron Rodgers never is really amicable. It felt like this offseason with the unexcused trip to Egypt that was heavily reported since Aaron Rodgers missed minicamp. It feels like the two people in the marriage that really like are trying to avoid counseling, and really it seems like things were over and this was finally just the last straw, where although Aaron hasn't come out and spoken heavily publicly about it. It seems like that relationship fracture kind of domino affected into this. And that just seems like how the Jets have become the team where we know them today, which is still dysfunctional, still has not an elite quarterback on their roster, still have good defensive players, but underachieving as they have been for the last decade.
Yeah, the Jets. The thing about the Jets, and I remember seeing this on Get Up this week, as they're talking about the firing. The Jets defense wasn't the issue, and that's where Robert Saleh was. That's why he was there, was because of the defense. And so, it's if you're Aaron Rodgers, you have to understand, which I don't think he understands anything, but you have to understand why people are looking at it as Nathaniel Hackett is the offensive coordinator here because you wanted him here. And the offense was bad, and Saleh was likely going to fire him at worst, at best, relieve him of his duties as play caller. You have to see it's a pretty clear road as to how we get from point A to point B of he's fired because Rodgers makes this decision. Now, when you look at the Jets, and like you said, dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. They have, since Woody Johnson bought the team in 2000, have had one of the bottom 3 offenses in the history of the NFL in that 24-year span. And you look at the team throughout the years when it was at its best, during the Rex Ryan era, they had Mark Sanchez as their quarterback. It's not like they were running over teams offensively. They were playing fantastic defense. And so if you're Woody Johnson, as you're approaching now, we need to find a new coach this offseason. You have to look at things and think, you know what? Let's do what all of these other teams have done. Let's go get Kyle Shanahan's offensive coordinator, right? You went to Kyle Shanahan, you took his DC last time. If at least give your team hope, because even if your defense gives up 41 points, your offense might score 44, as opposed to it doesn't matter what your defense does. Your offense can't get points on the board. Like we've seen this year in the Jets losses.
I can definitely get behind that, Jack. It feels like the Jets in some ways are on this treadmill of not being able to get out of their own way. It feels like it's just been a combination of bad picks, bad coaching hires, bad coaching decisions, bad luck with injuries at times. But the thing is, when you have so many bad things happening at so many different levels, that just points to bad ownership. And we haven't seen anything to show that they have any good ownership whatsoever. The evidence behind good ownership just isn't there, really. And that's really pretty disappointing for a team that the fans are very passionate. They're a very old NFL team, having won one of the first 3 Super Bowls. The fans deserve better than this, and it feels like fans become fans of teams, and the owner you can't fire the owner. And it feels like if you're a fan of the Jets, you just got to cross your fingers that the owner sells the team. And it feels like there are bigger fish to fry than that in the short term. But as a fan, I don't know how you can feel as far as upside of where do we go from here? How do we get out of this? As a fan, I just feel bad for the many Jets fans who I'm friends with, who it just feels like this has been their reality and will continue to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, getting back to this whole dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things, thing that we've talked about, everyone's talking about, well, Woody Johnson didn't actually hire Robert Saleh. Christopher Johnson did while he was an ambassador to United Kingdom for the United States. And it's like, you know what? Your brother made the hire, and you didn't have that much of a say in it, that even though you were like, I don't know about this guy, your brother just went ahead and did it when you're the owner. Even if we want to go down that rabbit trail that some people are trying to get us to go down, that is still insane that you're the owner of an NFL franchise and the guy you wanted, or you didn't get the guy you wanted, or the guy that got hired wasn't a guy that you liked, and oh well, I wasn't ambassador at the time. My brother was the one who didn't hire him. Like, you mean you were not part of that conversation at all? Like, that's just crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. It feels like a tough situation, and the whole being in the United Kingdom, being an ambassador there, just made it so much murkier. And
Right.
the fact of the matter is, whether he was gone or whether he was here, it's the same old Jets. It's been a mess with him here, with him gone, and it's still top down. You've had different GMs, you've had different coaches, you've had different brothers in the same family, and yet still the same issues. And so I don't know what else there is to say, but the Jets are the Jets, and
Right.
there's no real way around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, the biggest issue with this team is their offense. We've seen it now. It's not good. You have to wonder, what are the things that if Woody Johnson is right, that he believes in this squad, he believes that this squad is good enough that they can be seriously competitive. And you look at the team, and on paper they should be. But the offense is an issue. Now the interim head coach, Ulbrich, has removed the play calling responsibilities from Nathaniel Hackett and given them to the quarterbacks coach. And I think he's the passing game coordinator moving forward. So that's a start. But other things clearly need to happen for this squad to get better. What a lot of teams are talking about is Davante Adams. Now, personally, if you have a staled offense that isn't doing much and Rodgers isn't completing passes, he's throwing interceptions. He looked terrible on Sunday, by the way. I don't know how you can leave that game saying this is Robert Saleh's fault and not Aaron Rodgers' fault. His interceptions were not good, like really not good. But anyway, I don't think Davante Adams actually makes this offense better other than you have Davante Adams on the field. But, like, they've got a huge plethora of wide receivers already in Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Mike Williams. Mike Williams, who is like the fourth guy coming onto the field most of the time. I don't think going and getting Davante Adams is what's going to fix this. But that might just be me. Nick, do you think that Adams fixes this offense?
I don't know that he fixes it, but I think that he allows things to slot a little better. Where I think that Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback who's proven to be very beholden to his guys, whether it's Nathaniel Hackett as an OC or the wide receivers that he's throwing to. Where Allen Lazard has been the leading receiver on this team the first couple of weeks. And you and I can both agree he's not the second and probably not the third best wide receiver talent-wise on this team.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of the matter is it's because Aaron Rodgers trusts him because he was in Green Bay with him because he has the reps with him. And so for me, I just view it as Aaron Rodgers doesn't fully trust Garrett Wilson, but he trusts Davante Adams. And if he has Davante Adams, he trusts and he'll throw the ball there and he'll give X many targets to Adams. And then he'll give some fewer number of targets to Garrett Wilson and then some number of targets to his other receivers. That kind of allows more targets to people he trusts that I would say have a better probability of being like good plays. And so from that perspective, like say, for example, who probably is a better receiver right now, Tyreek Hill or Davante Adams? The answer is probably Tyreek Hill. But I would say, though, that Davante Adams would probably be a better fit in this offense just solely because of the relationship with Aaron Rodgers, although he's not better than Tyreek Hill, I would say. And so the fit matters a lot more with this team, I would say. Also, regarding their person they moved into play calling duties, Todd Downing, on the bright side, he has experience as an offensive coordinator with the Titans. So at least you're not moving somebody up to play calling duties who has no idea what he's doing regarding play calling.
Right.
But Todd Downing was not a very well-heralded guy coming out of the Titans after he was fired there when he was working on the staff with Mike Vrabel. But At the very least, you have somebody who can do some things as an OC. So they're not up a river without a paddle. It could be worse theoretically, but
Yeah. Yeah. So sort of good segue as we close out talking about the Jets, talking about Devontae Adams. The only way he's going to be a Jet is through trade. And so we are only 5 weeks into the season, but it's already that time to start speculating about some trades. And so Nick, you and I, we came up with some trades that we kind of want to see happen for the sake of either just our pleasure or the teams involved, things that are going to make teams better. But before we get into this, you texted me about a trade earlier this week, or at the end of
Oh
last
my
week,
gosh.
that I'm still not sure if you're pulling my leg out. So last Thursday was my birthday, and Nick texted me. I thought maybe this was like a birthday joke. He texts me and tells me that the Lions and the Rams need to complete a trade where the Lions
Oh my
send Jared
goodness.
Goff and a first-round pick to the Rams for Matthew Stafford. Now, I'm sitting there at dinner, enjoying my birthday dinner with my wife and daughter, and I'm reading this, and I'm like, there's no way this is real, right? And so I say that. And Nick, what do you say? You double down. You
I
triple
double down. I triple down. I do.
I just have to hear this. I have to hear this from your mouth. Explain it to me why you think that makes any sense.
So for me, first thing, I did not know it's your birthday. I should be a better friend and know when your birthday is. First off, I had no idea it was your birthday. Secondly, to defend myself, my perspective isn't that they should make this trade this moment, but that after like a bad Jared Goff game or two, when you get to see like the Jared Goof side of him of like throwing 2 interceptions and the offensive line doesn't hold up and he's not mobile. Like when you see that side of him, it becomes much more evident that the trade will make sense. Right now, it doesn't make as much sense because Jared Goff just threw a perfect ball game a week or so ago and went like 18 for 18 or something like that with no incompletions and caught a touchdown. Like he balled out in that game, to be clear. But the thing is that in this league, I feel like in the NFL, we're in an era where the quarterback matters more than it ever has. And that there's kind of a threshold of you have to be this good to be a separator quarterback. And Jared Goff has proven to not be a separator. He's proven to be more of a game manager quarterback. And Matt Stafford's proven to be a separator to some degree. And also has looked pretty good this year considering all his targets are injured. His offensive line looks horrendous. Where the last time we saw Matt Stafford on the Lions, it was with a bad offensive line, bad weapons, no run game. And so I just feel like from the perspective of the Lions, we know are gunning for a Super Bowl right now. And the Rams we know don't have a shot this year at the very least on a Super Bowl. And from what the reports are, they want to get younger at quarterback, probably draft somebody in a year or so or whatever. But so to be able to get younger at quarterback for the Rams and to be able to go all in for a Super Bowl, and I just feel like there's a level of poetry to it where I'm all for reunions and homecomings and the poetry of the sports game and life like that. And so I just love it. I loved it when the Rams played the Lions last year in the playoffs and you got to see the bit of revenge between those two teams, between the just budding miniature rivalry because they traded quarterbacks. But I'll quadruple down and say I think this trade, if it was just for this year, if you're looking at winning a Super Bowl, that the Lions would have a better shot at winning the Super Bowl, and that the Rams long term, this would make sense for them. And so I stand by that aspect of it, to be clear.
So I completely hear you on the. Actually, I don't completely hear you on the Rams aspect of it. And here's why. Jared Goff just signed a 4-year extension this offseason. So if they're trying to get younger, they get younger by like 7 or 8 years. But it's not like they get younger in a position that like we can draft a guy 2 drafts from now and it makes sense when you're still going to have Goff on the roster taking up that much money. So let's start with that.
Right. But I just mean to get younger at quarterback. That Goff is obviously many years younger and has way less mileage on the odometer, so to speak. Way less.
That's true. That is true. The second thing is you look at this Lions team, and unlike that Rams team that won a Super Bowl and hasn't been anywhere near that since, you're looking at a Lions team that is like, no, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are like, we are building a program here. We're not trying to go all in for 1 year and then what happens. They're both very secure in their jobs because they have seen that progression as the 3 years have gone from 3-13, or this is year 4. This is year 4. 3-13 or 2-14 to 8-9, just barely missing the playoffs, to making an NFC championship game, right? It's not like, and they've done all of that with Jared Goff. Jared Goff so far this year, pulling up his stats, his completion percentage right now, which granted they've only played 4 games, but is higher than it's been any year prior to this. His touchdown to interceptions last year was 30 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. The year before that was 29-7. The year before that was 19-8. It's not like he's an interception machine. It's not like he's a turnover machine, right? He is doing what he can and doing what he needs to. And the fact is, like, you want to talk about, oh, well, Goff has a couple bad games, he's not mobile enough. Do you think Matthew Stafford is more mobile than Jared Goff right now?
100%.
No.
100%.
No. Throwing off platform and being mobile is not the same thing. That's not the same thing.
Everybody's more mobile than Jared Goff.
Are you kidding me?
Maybe not Aaron Rodgers at this point being the oldest player in the league, but Matt Stafford's more mobile.
I would not say that. If I have to pick between the two of them to scramble 5 yards for a first down, I am picking Jared Goff over Matt Stafford. I'm picking Jared Goff over Matt Stafford.
But scrambling to run for a first down versus scrambling to throw for like 15 yards, it's by far Matthew Stafford over Goff as far as scrambling to throw, in my opinion.
I mean, maybe, but at the same time, you look at the amount of play action that the Lions run, and like, yes, it's not like rolling out to his right all the time, but like compared to what he was when he was under Sean McVay to now, he's gotten a lot better at it because he's been doing it a lot more, moving around. Not, again, he's not stretching the pocket like, Lamar Jackson or even Kyler Murray, but like he's not a statue. Like Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, both those guys right now are statues. He's not a statue. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that you just had, like, you can't like not talk about when it comes to this Lions team is the culture in that locker room. And Jared Goff is such a huge piece of that. Like, I'd say he is one of, if not the most important person with that, because, with the Lions, it's the grit, right? It is we're the castaways. We're forgotten. We're on no one's radar. And I mean, Jared Goff was the throw-in guy for the Matthew Stafford deal, right? And so he embraced that. He has embodied that all the way through. And I think nothing would be worse for that locker room than for the Lions to decide to make that move. Like, that would be earth-shattering in that locker room. And I think even if the talent is better, which honestly, I'm not willing to say that, but even if the talent is better, then I still don't know that it's the best thing for the team.
Personally, I also, just another angle of this, I think that Matt Stafford would probably be a better cultural fit than Jared Goff on the Lions. Like, I think he would fit that culture perfectly. Matt Stafford was criminally underrated for years and years and years in Detroit and got beat to hell and got injured as hell and basically toppled down the quarterback pyramid, so to speak, for years and years until he got traded unceremoniously to the Rams. When he was traded to the Rams, nobody was like, this is a top 5 quarterback. This is a game changer. This is going to make the Rams Super Bowl contenders. Nobody thought that then. And so I feel like Matt Stafford always has had this air of like, man, he deals with so much BS. He's the reason the teams are as good as they are. He's not getting help. He's the one giving the help. And so I feel like he has that grittiness that Detroit wants. So I feel like he'd be an amazing fit in that way, especially.
Yeah. I mean, you're right about the unceremoniously thing. I mean, when he came back last year in the playoffs, he was booed. He was asked about it, and he made it pretty clear that he was like, "Fine, I don't want to have anything to do with Detroit." Then, looking at his stats so far this year, he's got only 3 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Which, granted, not having Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp will hurt the touchdowns thing, but the interceptions thing, that's that's on him. Um, you're looking at his completion percentage right now. It's 67, which isn't awful, but again, Jared Goff is at like 72 right now, so that's a better completion percentage. He has more. Stafford has more yards, but he's also thrown, way more because he's been in an extra game. So
Mhm.
I just I could see if there was like no emotions about anything and there was no you were just if it was just like video game, right? And you're just trying to get the highest, Madden like average number for your team, I could see where that would be a decision that would make sense. But the locker room aspect of it, I just don't see. I can't get on board with.
I
I
think the
also think
biggest issue to me is actually the contract situation. You kind of dabbled in bringing that up, but Jared Goff just signing a huge extension. I think that will probably be the reason this trade wouldn't happen. Because I think that both
I
of
mean,
the
it won't
teams,
happen because Brad Holmes will hang up the phone before they even finish offering it. But
maybe, maybe,
so,
maybe.
all right,
But
we've talked about that. You've tried to convince me and have been completely unsuccessful. Um,
I also think Jared Goff's an offensive heaven and Matt Stafford's an offensive hell support wise. And so that's kind of where I'm at, where it's like, well, he has a better completion percentage and touchdown to interception ratio. It's like, well, okay, Jared Goff, go play behind that offensive line and throw to Tutu Atwell. See how you're going to look in those games. Like it,
well,
I don't
sure,
know.
and I mean, like you called Jared Goff. You said, "Oh, Jared Goff is just a system quarterback." The way I see it, all the good quarterbacks in the NFL, pretty much all the good quarterbacks in the NFL are system quarterbacks. Like you have to be in a good system to be as good as you are. Like, don't get me wrong, Patrick Mahomes is phenomenal, but like, imagine if Nathaniel Hackett was his play caller instead of Andy Reid, right? There's only
Right.
so much that Mahomes has so much more talent than Aaron Rodgers that's going to make him stand above like that. So that's just part of the NFL. Like the Lions have Ben Johnson and him and Jared Goff work really really well together. You know what? Like okay, that doesn't make Jared Goff any worse of a quarterback because of that. Just like it doesn't make Matthew Stafford any better of a quarterback because he was as successful as he was, last year with subpar offensive line play. It's just you're in your situation, and it would be worse if Jared Goff looked bad in the situation. Then it's like, okay, yeah, let's knock him down a peg. But we're trying to knock him down a peg for succeeding in a good situation. I don't see why that makes sense.
I wouldn't say knocking him down for being in a good situation, but I would just say, like, if you're just looking at the quarterbacks by themselves as who they are, that obviously one to me has evidence of being better than the other. And both of their support systems are very different. And so
Sure.
just looking at it from that, that's just where I'm at with it. But I hear you. I hear you not wanting to mess up the culture and like vibes and stuff and contracts. I get that. And I
Right.
completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I also would like to add of all of the quarterbacks that got multi-million dollar extensions this offseason, so far Jared Goff has had the best season so far. So
Mhm.
we're still ringing true there. But we didn't just come to talk about my Lions. We talked about or we brought together. We haven't gone over these beforehand. A few trades that we're kind of intrigued by if they were to happen here in this season. So I think I've got 4. Nick, you've got a few more. We'll just kind of go back and forth. I'll let you start, and we'll talk through some of these trades.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very similar to my Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford swap. The first one that I want to get behind is Dallas getting back Amari Cooper from the Browns. I put
Mm,
it as for a third round pick. I don't know necessarily that will be the value at this point, But I think clearly that we've seen that Dallas wants to throw the ball. And Brandon Cooks has been out. And their other receivers playing admirably. It feels like they just need that other reliable, other pop guy to be able to kind of play the kind of offense they want. And so I would say that Dallas getting Amari Cooper back will make a bunch of sense. He's on a 1-year deal with the Browns. He'll be a free agent after this year. It feels like the Browns are going this way and Dallas is trying to work their way back up. And so I would say that for now, that will make sense for both teams. I like the storyline of Amari Cooper after being traded to the Browns for like a 6th-round pick, basically, because the receiver market hadn't exploded yet until that offseason. That it will make a lot of sense for both teams in a lot of ways. The Browns have a number of other receivers who they've traded for and are developing. And they don't really need a 1-year rental number 1-ish receiver on their team. They just don't need Amari Cooper right now. And it doesn't make much sense to keep him. So that'd be where I'd go first.
Yeah, I definitely think. I mean, I'd be surprised if the Browns don't trade Amari Cooper this season. I mean, unless something happens, and they win like all of like every game between now and the trade deadline, and they really, really turn it around, which won't happen. Maybe if they bench Watson for Jameis Winston, it might happen. Which is crazy to say that is the thing that just got said, but. But yeah, I would be shocked if Amari Cooper isn't traded before the trade deadline. I thought about having him to the Steelers as one of my trades, even though that would be a great example of the Browns being the Browns. Actually, if it was the Browns being the Browns, they wouldn't get a trade offer, and so they'd cut him, and then the Steelers would pick him up, like Joe Hayden back in the day, which is just so stupid. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Well, no, the dumbest thing is trading your
Deshaun Watson
livelihood for Deshaun Watson. Yeah,
fully guaranteed contract.
Yeah, but the thing with the Cowboys though is like I hear you, but where they're struggling and where I think the Lions are going to seriously take advantage of them this week is that they can't stop the run to save their lives. They were able to stop the run against Pittsburgh this last week, but I frankly think that's because Najee Harris played behind a bad offensive line for so long that he doesn't know that you're not supposed to run where guys are that are going to tackle you. He had some flashes of losing that last year, but it's kind of come back a little bit. And the Steelers didn't have Jaylen Warren, which was a serious detriment to their run game. So I don't think that said much about Dallas's ability to stop the run. I think it said more about the Steelers' run game in that game. But I think if the Cowboys are going to trade, I mean they got to be looking for a defensive tackle, somebody or a linebacker that's actually the size of a linebacker. But I also have a trade that involves the Cleveland Browns, as they are in a rebuilding season and moving into a rebuilding stretch. And we have our New York Jets that I think the actual thing that they need to do to fix themselves is fix their offensive line. And so Jedrick Wills is on an expiring contract. He has not been paid yet. From what I have seen, I don't think he's worth being paid like a first-round pick offensive tackle that is getting that first contract. And so the Jets need offensive line help, and I think that could actually be a really, really good deal, beneficial for both sides. Again, the Browns, the Browns would be the Browns to pay him and to pay him substantially when they're desperately trying to clean their books so they can actually rebuild. But I think it would be good for the Jets, maybe even before trying to go get Devontae Adams, to try and shore up that offensive line. And when you look at sort of the top end offensive linemen that are on expiring contracts, he's sort of the best one that is on a team that is definitely going to be looking to be selling instead of buying at the deadline.
I can get behind that. I had the Browns as a huge selling team. I had a number of dudes on the Browns who I think easily could be sold. I think that besides Amari Cooper, I think Elijah Moore, receiver. I think Zadarius Smith, opposite edge to Myles Garrett. I think he would be he'd be a really juicy trade piece to a team who wants a second edge rusher. I think Juan Thornhill stuck as like the 4th or 5th safety could be like a 6th or 7th round pick trade, and he could really like be an extra safety to a team. I think the Browns have a ton of dudes who teams should be calling about, to be honest, considering this team falling apart right now.
Yeah. They've got a lot of talent on a team that should not be going 1-4 right now. And I could see if you're the Browns, owners and general manager looking, going, all right, you know what? This year is going to be a bad year. Instead of blowing it up, let's go and let's get a different quarterback that will actually compete with Deshaun Watson for the starting job. And if he wins it, just give it to him and be willing to admit we made a mistake paying Deshaun Watson the money. Because if they did that this offseason, even if they go, let's say, 5-12, they could easily then be a playoff team the following year. But the fact is, if they're not willing to do that, then they should absolutely clean house. Player-wise, I don't think Stefanski is the issue. You look at him, he got him to the playoffs last year with a combination of Deshaun Watson, PJ Walker, Joe Flacco, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right? He's not the problem. So if after this year you fire him, then more Browns being the Browns, I guess.
Yeah, I can get behind. I think there are a bunch of teams that could use some of the same support you're talking about. A lot of defensive tackle needy teams, a lot of edge needy teams. The next team that I was planning on hitting up was your Detroit Lions. There are 2 main needs that I'm seeing on the Lions, and I know that you've talked with me about covering one of those needs. I went with the opposite, and so I think there are 2 dudes who could fill the hole of the opposite edge rusher to Aiden Hutchinson. I think having an extra edge rusher to kind of take the pressure off Hutchinson, there are 2 guys who really jump out at me. First one would be Zadarius Smith on the Browns, who I brought up before. He's not the dude actually who I think would necessarily be the best fit opposite Hutchinson. I think that opposite edge rusher position would really make this Lions defense really good. But the guy who I would go with would actually be edge rusher for the Tennessee Titans, Harold Landry II. He is a really underrated guy to me, and he was a really good edge rusher on a Titans team that didn't have great edge rusher defensive line help for many, many years. He tore his ACL 2 years ago, but bounced back last year getting double-digit sacks. I think you could get him on this Titans team that really, they have an offensive coach who is going to want to lean more into the offense. And Harold Landry's at that kind of 28, 29-year-old age where he's not sold, where he's going to command nothing, but he's not first contract where it's going to be hard to trade him. And so I feel like Harold Landry really is a speed rusher opposite another amazing speed rusher with Hutchinson, could really form an amazing tandem after Marcus Davenport's been injured and has been very inconsistent for many, many years. And I believe he's only on a 1-year contract. So if you just went with Landry opposite Hutchinson, I think that would be a really great duo for a couple of years here.
I like it. I also had Detroit trading for an edge rusher.
I was going to say, we on the same mind.
We're on the same idea of an edge rusher because I think, though the Lions secondary is suspect, if you're able to get to the quarterback faster, you're able to relieve some of the pressure of the secondary. Definitely saw in the Seahawks game and in the Rams game, there were times that it was like, this should be a coverage sack. The secondary was on the receivers well enough. But those teams are relying on 3 players to stop Hutchinson, and no one else is able to break through. And so there's some of those times that you get an edge rusher on the other side that is dominant and is able to make noise, then you can't just put all of your eggs in stopping Aiden Hutchinson. So a team that is looking to certainly clean house. It's already been clear. They're starting Officer O'Connell at quarterback instead of Gardner Minshew anymore. It's really clear that the Raiders are trying to tank, and I don't know, get Shedeur Sanders, which I don't think is a great idea. But if that's what they're trying to do, then that's what they're trying to do. Devontae Adams they're trying to trade him. They're also answering calls for other guys too, including Jacoby Myers
Oh,
and
man.
Max Crosby. And so
No.
I would love to see. I mean, I think honestly, that would be a better duo in edge rushers than when the Browns were with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, because
Yeah.
Crosby is still at the top of his game. Hutchinson's coming into his own instead of Garrett coming into his own and Clowney kind of being a little washed. I think that would just be an incredible tandem. If I'm Brad Holmes, I'm getting on the phone and I'm not getting off until I know what it's going to take and seeing what I can do about it. Because I mean, I think that would put them over the top. And they have the cap space to do it. It's not an impossible thing to do. Obviously Brad Holmes is great at his job, so you would probably try to talk the Raiders into covering some of the contract. But even if they were like, no, we're not covering any of the contract if we're trading him, the Lions could still do it and could take that on. So I'm on the same page as you with getting an edge rusher. And here's the thing. I don't think that's out. Like, it's already been clear that the Raiders are pretty much everyone's on the table. It's not like, it's not like I'm like, yeah, the Lions should get the Steelers to trade TJ Watt, right? Like, it's not like that. Or the Lions should get the Browns to trade Myles Garrett. Like, the Raiders are like, we're listening. So if they're listening, then it means that there must be some price out there that they're willing to sell for.
I hear you. What do you think that price is?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's also on.
What would you trade? What's the low end of what you'd trade? Low to average end of what you think it would take? Would you be willing to trade?
If I'm the Lions, I am absolutely willing to give up like a 2 and a 5, like no doubt, to get him. I know that they would want more. But at the same time, they only want a 2 and a 7 for Devontae Adams. Now, granted, I understand why teams aren't willing to do that because again, they're trying to talk him down. But like, if that's the price, if Brad Holmes calls the Raiders and they're like, yeah, we'll need a 2 and a 7, I'm like, done. I'll sign. Like, are you kidding me?
Sure, I hear you. But the thing is, I think what you think it'll take and what I think it'll take, there is a big Oceania-sized gap, I think. I think it would probably take.
Go ahead.
I think it would probably take 2 first-round picks plus something. I think it would take that.
I'm not saying that it wouldn't. I'm not saying that I wouldn't be willing to give that up if I know I'm getting Max Crosby. But the outlier is that the Raiders are stupid and Mark Davis is an idiot. So, like,
but even trading Khalil Mack, they traded Khalil Mack for 2 first-round picks and something. And I don't know that Khalil Mack and Max Crosby are far apart as far as prime Khalil Mack.
I don't think so. I'm thinking, I'm thinking realistically. You said low, like bottom. I'm like, I mean, if I could get him for this, I'm doing that. Like, realistically, I think that the Lions could trade like a first-round pick, a third-round pick, and some player, some young guy. I don't know who. The first name that comes to mind is Terrion Arnold because I'm tired of him committing defensive pass interference and holding. But obviously they just took him with a first round pick, so they're not gonna give him up. But what the Raiders asking price is, obviously you negotiate a little bit, but I'm willing to do it. The Lions have been very, very good. Brad Holmes has been really good about not trading picks, especially high-end ones, because they've done such a great job of developing guys. And so, like, yes, I could see, well, we could go get an edge with our first-round pick this next draft and develop him, and it would be great. It's like, you could, but that doesn't solve the problem that we have right now. And I think Crosby would be a good fit. He's from Michigan. He went to Eastern Michigan, 45 minutes away from Detroit. It's a match that I want to see made. So
Max
all right.
Crosby, though, Jack, would be an amazing addition opposite Hutchinson, obviously. I think that would probably be the best edge rusher duo in NFL history as far as in their primes, probably.
Right.
But yeah, I think that'd be amazing, but the price would probably just be insane.
Well, I mean, if you're here's how I look at it, especially thinking about your Stafford for Goff trade earlier. If you want to go in and make a deal that's like we're trying to win this year, I think giving up what it takes to get Max Crosby is worth well more doing that than the Goff and first round pick for Matt Stafford trade because of how much more significant of a leap that trade is and how much more that's going to move the needle, not just for one position, but for an entire unit that needs that extra bit of help.
I hear you. Does the first round pick sway you a lot for the Matt Stafford trade? Like if it were like a third round pick in Goff for Stafford, does that sway you? I'm just wondering.
The pick was like I didn't even really think about that. I'm not even joking.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, okay, if it was just a Goff for Stafford swap right now, I'm like, does that do what? And if the answer is, but the vibes, I'm like, okay, I get it. If it's just about vibes, then like no trade's gonna work. It's not about the value, but like, I hear you. And just wanted to make sure.
And then I promise this is the last we talk about the Lions, unless you have another Lions trade that you've put together. Is the Lions offense is a really, really good unit. It is by far between their offense and their defense, it is the better of the two units. And so doing something like that does rock the boat so much to improve an already definitely like top third in the league offense, and then in the NFC, definitely like top 4 offense in the NFC. Doing something like that when the defense is what would need the most help and making a deal for Max Crosby. And it doesn't even have to, I mean, I would want it to be Crosby, but like the guys you mentioned, making a deal that does that makes the defense like bolsters them from like average to definitely above average and getting even farther in terms of top of the class in the NFL. So
yeah, I completely agree with you there that Crosby and Hutchinson, like that goes from an average defense to a top 10, maybe top 5 unit just solely because of the pass rush. But moving on, as we have spent a lot of time relitigating and litigating the Lions and many a trade for them. The last one that I really feel like super realistic to me would be Kansas City going after Christian Kirk on the Jaguars. I feel like it's clear and obvious to everybody under the sun that Kansas City needs another receiver. Juju came in last week and played very well, put up a bunch of yards. But obviously it feels like they can't reliably produce offense against really high-end defenses. And it might just be a struggle for them producing offense consistently this whole year. I feel like Christian Kirk kind of falls into the archetype of fast, but can also do some contested catch stuff, can do some mid-deep field stuff. And he also, like Hollywood Brown, like downfield Arizona Cardinals air raid kind of system with Cliff Kingsbury. I feel like the systematic downfield throw type play style would make a lot of sense with Kansas City. And I think the Jaguars should be willing to sell just about everything they got outside of like Josh Allen and Trevor Lawrence. Like I think that just about, and maybe Campbell, the corner, I think that they should be pretty willing to sell most of their team, to be honest, right now. But I would say Christian Kirk for maybe a 4th and a 6th would be a good deal for Kansas City. I think that makes sense. I think that the people who think Devontae Adams to the Chiefs, I just don't think an interdivision trade would happen, even though I think that it would make sense. I think that there are just too many feelings there that teams don't like to do that. But I feel like Jags to Kansas City, it would make sense. So I'd go there.
Yep, I can get on board with that. My thing with the Chiefs and their need for a wide receiver is like I don't feel like they need that speedy guy. I feel like they need that big guy. Like for their speedy guy, they've got Xavier Worthy, right? You know, they have Juju Smith-Schuster, which I think everyone thinks that he's a bum because of what happened in New England, but it's not true. The thing is, he was in New England. That's why he was a bum, and it was because of that. He comes back to Kansas City. He has the night that he does this week. So I feel like they need that guy that, you know, it won't be Devontae Adams, but would be a guy like a Devontae Adams. And or a guy that I have in this next trade, though it's not to Kansas City. We've talked a little bit, both personally, and just a lot of people are talking about how big of a need there is for a receiver in Pittsburgh. A lot of people have, you know, like, what about Devontae to Pittsburgh? I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to want to give up what it would take. Plus, I don't think he necessarily wants to go there after coming from a place with, let's just call it, not the best quarterback play. I don't think he wants to go somewhere where he's not guaranteed to be taken care of by his quarterback. So I have somebody else going there. This is a guy who fits that archetype of that, you know, big receiver, just can go up and can get whatever ball is kind of thrown his way, runs really good routes. He is on an expiring deal. He was traded this last offseason to the team that he's on now. Since being on this team, he's been a little injured. Also, this team has not been really meeting the expectations that they had in front of them. He is 5th on the team in targets so far this year, and that is Keenan Allen. I think you look at the Bears, I think that going and getting Keenan Allen with the high expectations that they had was a great move for them. But I think now is like, it's like, okay, and let's reel in let's come back to reality a little bit with them, that they're probably not going to be a playoff team. They're not going to be the Texans of last year, certainly. And so when they get to the offseason, are they going to offer Keenan Allen a big deal? I don't think so. I think also Keenan Allen is at that point that he's going to be that bouncing around 1-year deal to 1-year deal between different places. And I actually think that Pittsburgh needing a wide receiver like that, being competitive now, being competitive in their division. The AFC North, who I thought was going to be the most competitive division in football record-wise, isn't. It's the NFC North this year. And Pittsburgh at 3-2 is still there. I mean, they're tied for the lead in the division right now with Baltimore. You know, Tomlin, though, I think it would be really foolish for the Steelers to fire him, you know, after last season and another year where they got to the playoffs but didn't win, having another year of we're too good to have, you know, a lottery pick, but we're not good enough to actually advance in the playoffs. I think this would be a really, really good move for Pittsburgh to make, to try and advance them a little bit, take a little bit of pressure off of George Pickens. Also, Keenan Allen has always been just a stand-up professional in the league, would be a great guy to have in that locker room to mentor George Pickens and to hopefully bring stability, even just for the rest of the season, to what I think has historically been one of the most out of control rooms in the NFL when it comes to the Steelers wide receiver room. Just when it comes to the drama, the divas, all of that, the off the field stuff, all of that crap. Going back to Antonio Brown, you know, before him, you had issues with Martavis Bryant. You had issues with Santonio Holmes and Mike Wallace. Most recently, issues with Deontay Johnson, and right now with George Pickens. I just think that would be a really, really good move for the Steelers to make. And again, he's on an expiring contract. I think they could get him for like just a 4th or a 5th round pick if the Bears are willing to make the move. Now, again, they might not be. They might be more delusional about where they are than anyone else's, the way anyone else sees them. But I think that it would make sense. And if it was for a 4th round pick, they would get more than they gave up for him in the offseason when they traded for him from the Chargers, because the Chargers traded him for a bag of chips. So
Oh, they got a 4th-round pick.
Was it a 4th?
It was a 4th-round pick. I just looked.
Oh, okay.
It was a 4th.
Okay. Well, then, if
Yes.
you're the Bears, you make up for your losses. But still, I think that would be a good move for Pittsburgh to make.
Yeah, I hear you from the getting an adult in the room and really leadership, veteran, route running. I just feel like, what was it, last year? Last year we had receiver Allen Robinson in the wide receiver room. Allen Robinson has had very good years with the Jaguars, with the Bears, and it seems like his body kind of failed him. And like last year with the Steelers, he wasn't great. He had like 1, 2, maybe 300 yards, and he played his role well and was the veteran kind of leader on the team. But I think his body failing him and just like age caught up to him. And I think that Keenan Allen would have some of the same issues where I just don't know that Keenan Allen at this age necessarily is that much of an impact guy. And so I don't know that he does enough for the Steelers where like the Steelers need help at receiver. And I don't know that he's the difference maker that he used to be. But I like the fit. I think for like a 5th or a 6th, I think it's reasonable. But like this year in 3 games, he has like 81 yards. Keenan Allen's not really doing a lot. He's on a Bears team that has a number of wide receivers on it.
Right.
I hear you. I like the fit theoretically, but like the Steelers need a little bit more juice, and they just like do not have juice on the outside right now besides Pickens, and Pickens has been very inconsistent lately. Yeah. But I like that you're thinking about my Steelers and about doing something. I like it.
Well, the thing when it comes to, what sort of wheels does Allen Robinson have, or sorry, Keenan Allen have on him compared to Allen Robinson? You look at who Allen Robinson's quarterbacks were, and how long he spent in Chicago with bad quarterback play compared to Keenan Allen had Phillip Rivers and then Justin Herbert. He had good quarterback play, which good quarterback play does keep your receivers healthy because you're not asking them to do too much because you're throwing good balls that are easier for them to get to. You're not leading them into, getting just absolutely destroyed by DBs, stuff like that. I think that Keenan Allen actually has a little bit more life on him, enough life that I think he actually could come in and have a really good rest of this year for the Steelers. And then again, he's a loaner, he's a rental. You don't need to re-sign him. But still.
Yeah, I hear you. I just don't think that Keenan Allen this year could break for the total year 600 yards. Like, I just don't think, even if he's being featured in whatever offense he's in, like he was trying to be featured by the Bears in week 1, and he wasn't putting up any crazy sorts of numbers. Sure. It just feels like,
well, wasn't that the game that Caleb Williams only completed like 7 passes or something against the Titans?
Yeah, it was bad, but he's been injured this year too. Sure. It just feels like replacement level parts rather than improvement type parts. And so I don't know that it would make a lot of sense from the Steelers in terms of improving. But I like where your head's at. I like what you're thinking about. I was trying to think because this year, one of the big themes of the year has been running the ball, and a lot of teams have done a great job at running the ball. There have been a lot of great running back renaissance this year. And so there are a number of teams that I was contemplating defensive tackle help. As you said, Dallas needs help at defensive tackle. I think Seattle, due to injury, needs defensive tackle help. I think that Buffalo, due to injuries, needs defensive tackle help. I was looking around, and defensive tackles, I feel like it's hard to find dudes who are really upgrades. I kind of liked when I was poking around, I kind of liked the Panthers guys, Shai Tuttle, Ashawn Robinson. I think that they at defensive tackle could do good things. I think Devon Hamilton on the Jaguars. I think Devon Godshaw on the Patriots. I just feel like there are defensive tackles, but I don't know necessarily what the best fit would be. But so I was playing with the idea of any of those defensive tackles with a couple of those teams. If you have any thoughts on that, I'm open to interpretation. I just feel like defensive tackle injuries have been a big theme this year, and that the Panthers should be selling everything they got. So I think that they could be a good fit to pull away from. But
yeah, and I think defensive tackle, and with the resurgence of the run game, we saw for a while like the middle linebacker position wasn't super important because of how much the ball was getting thrown, and at the time the Lions taking Jack Campbell in the first round seemed like an overdraft, but now as teams are running the ball more, it's been something that's been a real luxury that they have in that position. And so another team, we talked about the Browns earlier and like, what are they going to do? They shouldn't sell if they're like, after this year, we're cutting ties with Watson and we're getting a different quarterback because that alone makes that team better. But if they are, they have a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah who has not been extended yet, who would be a guy that would be a great get for a team like the Cowboys that's really undersized at linebacker in general, and then especially middle linebacker. Some of these other teams, like we've talked about, that are struggling to stop the run, and maybe they aren't able to get a defensive lineman that they like, but they can maybe get a middle linebacker to help slot in there. I think he's another guy that could be available depending on what the Browns decide to do. And would be a guy that, heck, even though the Lions have Jack Campbell, I'd be like, should we call?
Super athletic, speedy, coverage, game-breaking type linebacker. JOK is incredibly good. He's had injuries throughout his career, but he's really great as a player and can be amazing in the right situation, I would say.
Yep. I still remember when the Browns drafted him, they got him in the second round. He was a first-round caliber player, but there was something about like some heart condition.
Heart issue,
hasn't affected him since. Maybe he has had some other injury issues, but nothing, drastic or severe like that. And so the Browns have taken advantage of that. My last trade that I've got here is we have a team. There's this guy that I follow. His name is Jack Settleman, and he has this page called Snapback Sports. Because he started just only on the platform of Snapchat. And every week he does a tier list of teams in the NFL. He has contenders, he has cuties, and he has bottom feeders. And this year he added a little section that is contenders if they replace their quarterback. Basically, the entire rest of the team is good enough. They just need a different quarterback. And one of the teams that is in there since their quarterback got injured is the Miami Dolphins. And I look at that team and I think they need a quarterback. They don't need to go like all in crazy, for like a big name quarterback, but somebody that can come in and it hopefully be better than what they have right now at backup quarterback. If Tua comes back, then they haven't given up much. And if he gets hurt again, hopefully they have somebody that's better. I think regardless of whether Tua comes back or not, they need to get something. The Tyler Huntley thing has not worked out so far. Do they still have Skylar Thompson? Is that the other guy? Yeah. I mean, he's not it, So a team that I'm looking at, a guy that I'm looking at, it is obvious that Carolina is done with Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Bryce Young's trade value could not be lower right now. And so if I'm Miami, and this was like floated around because when Tua got the concussion, that was when Carolina benched Bryce Young. Then it sort of stopped being talked about. I'm still thinking about it, and I'm still thinking if you're Miami, you can probably get Bryce Young for whatever you're willing to give up, and Carolina will be like, fine, we'll take it. And so if I'm Miami, I'm making that phone call, whether it's a 6th round pick, whether it's a 7th round pick, it's gonna be low. It's gonna be like when Josh Rosen got traded level of compensation, if that. And I think that you can absolutely, if you're Miami, you can do that, and you should do that, because there's no way that in Bryce Young you're going to get worse quarterback play than what you have right now without Tua anyway. And who knows if it's a really like low risk, high reward if it pays off, and if it doesn't pay off, you basically haven't given up anything.
I love the fit, love the idea. I love everything about the trade you're talking about, to be honest. I also feel like there's some college poetry of Bryce Young sitting behind to an Alabama quarterback connection. I also feel like the natural part where my mind goes is like short quarterback really focuses on accuracy and throwing the ball kind of short intermediate and working your way down the field, not big, strong, deep passers. Like they're similar in that way. And so I feel like you're completely right in every area. I agree with you in every way. I also think the value would probably be like a 6th round pick or something insanely low like that. But one just like small, like Josh Rosen was a certified bust. The Dolphins traded a 2nd round pick to the Cardinals to get him, which is absurd and like just silly in retrospect. But man, it just like Bryce Young, I think, would fit, but it seems almost to me like the one of the drawbacks is that Mike McDaniel's system is super complicated on the Dolphins. And so I feel like almost any backup quarterback or quarterback coming in might struggle just because of the complicated system. But I definitely think Bryce Young will be a big upgrade and could resuscitate what little of a career he's had thus far. So I love that pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the right call. I mean, if you're Miami, maybe you call the Raiders about Gardner Minshew. Like, if you're already moving on from him to Aiden O'Connell, it's not because you actually think you're going to win more games with Aiden O'Connell. It's because you're not trying to win games. Like it's just true. So maybe he's a guy that has bounced around as a really, really great backup quarterback. Not a great starting quarterback, but a great backup quarterback. He might be a guy to call. Maybe you call Denver about Zach Wilson, or maybe you call the Giants about Drew Lock. But like, if you're Miami, you got to call somebody about somebody. You can't just keep sitting here
the
like
Raiders with O'Connell or Minshew. You need somebody with a pulse.
Right. Yeah. So the Texans with Davis Mills, like there are.
Yeah, you're right. Even Case Keenum.
Yeah. So there are things that if you're the Dolphins, it's not like the Dolphins are the Chiefs, right? That like they've established themselves. A freak injury happens to their quarterback and they're struggling. But you know what? Like, even if this year isn't their year, their coaching staff is fine. No one's getting fired. There's no risk of that. You look at the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel has done well, has won them games, has gotten them to the playoffs, but they haven't won the division under him and they haven't won a playoff game with him there. So if I'm if I'm Mike McDaniel, I'm starting to think whether ownership and general manager has told me I'm on the hot seat or not, I'm just starting to think like, you know what? I want to do something that tries to get us farther than where we've kind of plateaued so far. So
I hear you, Jack. Moving on to a couple of other topics we have. Just one little what's more likely for you tonight, Jack. What's more likely, Bengals make the playoffs or Vikings miss the playoffs?
Yeah, more likely is that the Vikings miss the playoffs. The last time that a team started 5-0 and didn't make the playoffs, it was the Minnesota Vikings in 2016 with Sam Bradford as their backup quarterback because their starting quarterback got hurt before the season started and was out for the year. Now, it's just too eerily similar. On Sunday, we saw what Sam Darnold could be. He sort of came back down to earth a little bit. Now, I wasn't like seeing all of this that Darnold was doing before this last Sunday and thinking like, oh well, he's bad. He's gonna have it's gonna even out. Like nothing like that. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking like he has certainly gotten better. There's no way that the Sam Darnold that was at the New York Jets has not progressed to even be able to do what he's been doing with Minnesota. Like that is not just you take a same person, you put him in a better situation type thing. That is the nature of going and playing for the Niners and seeing Kyle Shanahan's offense and stuff like that. That is the growth that you've seen there. But at the same time, he wasn't Peyton Manning, who had a really bad first year as a rookie and then seriously turned it around and turned into one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And we saw that on Sunday. We saw like, okay, he's kind of coming back down to earth a little bit. Doesn't mean he hasn't gotten better, but it does mean that when this average is out, he will be better than he was, but he's not, Aaron Rodgers when he had the 48 touchdown, 3 interception season. And so I just think that, I think they absolutely lose that game if there's competent offensive play by the Jets. If you look at Minnesota's schedule coming up, they've got a bye week this week, just like they had in 2016. They won their first 5 games, had a bye week, came out of it, lost all but 2 of their remaining games. So when they come out of their bye week, they have Detroit, the Rams, and at that point, Puka Nacua should be back. Cooper Kupp should be back. They've got Indianapolis, they've got Jacksonville, they've got Tennessee. That's a 3-game stretch that they could definitely win all 3 of those games. But then you still have to play Chicago twice. You have to play Atlanta. You have to play Seattle. You have to play Green Bay again. You have to play Detroit again. There's a lot. The schedule is going to get harder, and their team is just going to be more injured just in general because that's just the nature of football. So I think that even though I would be really, really surprised if the Bengals do make the playoffs, I still think that it's easily more likely that Minnesota misses the playoffs.
Got you. I actually will probably disagree with you. I think Minnesota has looked like I think they've looked the best out of every team in the whole league, seemingly this year. Like the Chiefs are the only other 5-0 team, and they haven't looked great this year. They've barely pulled stuff out. And Minnesota's schedule up to this point has been insanely difficult. Let me just grab it here. It's been the Jets. It's been the Packers. And it was Houston, Packers with Jordan Love. It was Houston. It was 49ers. Like, those are difficult games. Those are games that I bet they were underdogs in most of, if not all of those games, just because those are good other teams. And nobody thought the Vikings were going to be this good this year. I feel like the Vikings have looked really good, and Cincinnati has also looked pretty good. Their defense hasn't, but their offense is finally starting to look insane. And so I definitely put my money on Cincinnati. I think just because the AFC has looked weaker and the NFC's looked stronger. And so I feel like the AFC being weaker, I just bet on Cincinnati being able to take advantage here at some point, where it feels like the Steelers have kind of tailed off a little right now, and it feels like the Browns have fallen off a cliff. It feels like the Jaguars have fallen off a cliff. It feels like there are just more holes that Cincinnati can kind of fill in terms of the playoff picture, that it feels like the Vikings, although their division's difficult, that they've just looked better than everybody else. So
yeah, I mean, I'm at. You look at Joe Burrow's year so far. They're 1-4. He has completed 72.3% of his passes. He has thrown 12 touchdowns to only 2 picks. I mean, he is. We sort of talked about like, oh well, this is just typical Burrow and the way that he starts off slow, right? He honestly hasn't. Like the first game of the season, like was weird for them when they played New England, but he still was 21 of 29. Like it's not, and he had no interceptions. Against Kansas City, he was 23 of 36 for 258, 2 touchdowns. Against Washington, he was 29 of 38 for 324 and 3 touchdowns. Against Baltimore this last week, he was 30 of 39, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns. So the reason that I'm not convinced with Cincinnati making the playoffs is because it hasn't been like years past where they start off slow because Burrow isn't playing well, and then he gets it together, they round into shape, and they take off. Like, he's been playing really, really well, and they still are where they're at. I mean, he's on pace to throw 50 touchdowns this year, and they're still 1-4. That just goes to show how bad the defense is, certainly. I mean, what is it exactly? How many points have they given up? They gave up the loss to New England. Again, that was really weird. Only gave up 16 points. gave up 25 to Kansas City, gave up 38 to Washington. In a win against Carolina, they gave up 24, and then they gave up 41 to Baltimore. Like, defense, yikes. And it just seems like the more games that they play, the more teams are seeing, oh, this is how we exploit this defense. And so, I mean, like I talked about when we were talking about the Jets, and when you have a good offense, even if you give up 41 points, there's still the chance of scoring 44. I think that, yes, that's the case, but also that's not the formula to win 12 games and get into the playoffs, right? So I'm really concerned about Cincinnati. We didn't talk about, when we talked about our trades, them trading either of their wide receivers, but I think we definitely need to be keeping a close eye on that. Certainly T. Higgins, between the two, I would be shocked if they trade Jamar Chase. But again, if they're still really stalled on a contract extension, then you can certainly trade Jamar Chase and get first-round picks for him. And so if I'm Cincinnati and we're not getting anywhere, I'm thinking about it if we're 2-8, come the trade deadline. So I don't know. I was wrong about Cincinnati coming into this year. I mean, I had them winning the division. I thought they were going to win 13 or 14 games. And I guess technically it's still mathematically possible for them to win 13 games. But when you watch the tape, that's not happening. So
right.
I hear you when it comes to the Viking side of it, but the Cincinnati side of it is just, it is really, really hard to look at.
It's tough. And the funky thing to me is that it's not just their run defense, it's their pass defense and run defense. Their defensive tackles and linebackers can't stop the run. Their corners are just getting torched constantly on the weekly. And you'd think with their edge rushers, they got good edge rushers. They have good corners, in my opinion. At least they haven't played very well, to be honest. But their whole defense, it feels like top to bottom, with a good defensive coordinator and good pieces, in my opinion, just has been absolutely lit on fire week after week after week. And so it feels like the Cincinnati of the last couple years where their defense can shut everybody down. It seems like they're shutting down the Chiefs and everybody else is struggling. And the Chiefs, even point-wise, they're not shutting down, but they make Patrick Mahomes look human, which is something nobody else can really say.
No. And I will say with that game, I watched the entirety of that game, and they could have thrown a flag for holding every single play that Trey Hendrickson was on the field, and they didn't. And that's just officiating. I'm not even going to go to, oh, well, that's the Chiefs. Like, it's just officiating in general. It happens. In Syracuse's game against UNLV last week, there was a blatant hold on a touchdown run that just wasn't called. It just happens. You just need to get over it at some point. And I think I have, to an extent at this point, when my team isn't involved, like everybody has, right? But yeah, Cincinnati looked their best in that game against Kansas City, and they've played far worse than what their talent would suggest in every other game they've had this year.
I completely get you there. Just to wrap up here, I have one last little game for you, as we have been going long this episode. But my last little game for you, we're talking about Jayden Daniels, the seemingly preeminent offensive rookie of the year. Malik Neighbors has obviously looked amazing, but Jayden Daniels has looked like the best rookie quarterback we've ever seen. And CJ Stroud was just last year, which is really saying something. And so we're going to play a little Jayden Daniels or this NFC quarterback. We're not going to do AFC just because his primary competition's the NFC quarterbacks. And you may have seen this clip the last week of Stephen A. Smith being like, so who's the best quarterback in the NFC, to Chris Carter? And Chris Carter very reluctantly says there's this guy in Washington, because there is indeed this guy in Washington now in Jayden Daniels. And so we're just going to start off with a few softballs here. Starting off, Jayden Daniels or Daniel Jones?
Yeah, Jayden Daniels.
Moving on to
the Cowboys made Daniel Jones look like a good quarterback until they got into the red zone, which just goes to show how bad the Cowboys really are.
Very true. Moving on to a former backup now, Andy Dalton, starter for the Panthers.
Jayden Daniels. Yeah, not a question really.
Yeah. And on to Derek Carr.
If we were through week 2, I think I would say Derek Carr.
Mm-hmm.
But the Saints' offensive fall off has been insane. Like they should do a 30 for 30 on it already in the season, only 5 games in. So give me Jayden Daniels.
Also, to give a little qualification for this game we're talking about just this season, just the quarterback, not expectations for the team, not based on situation, just this quarterback or that quarterback for just this season. So it's not like, well, Jayden Daniels is younger than everybody. So, like, of course, I'd take him more than Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers is a million years old. Although you probably should take him more than Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers is washed. But moving on to our next quarterback here, Jalen Hurts.
Oh, Jayden Daniels, no doubt.
Yeah, the fall off of Jalen Hurts needs to be studied too.
Facts.
Next up, Sam Darnold.
I'm going to say Jayden Daniels, but the amount of touchdowns Sam Darnold has thrown compared to Jayden Daniels is worth noting. But I am going to say Jayden Daniels because I think what he has done for the Commanders' offense with the weapons that he has had, and his ability to move the ball and have such a fluid offense, even in their loss to Tampa, he still looked pretty good. His stat line in that game, he went 17 of 24 for 184 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But 17 of 24, rookie, first career start, really, really good stat line, I would say. He had a really good game. I think he had a rushing touchdown in that game, too.
He had a great rushing line. I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He did a great job running in that game.
Let's see. Yeah, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, and he had 88 yards.
Amazing rushing game.
Yeah, so I'm given, considering how bad Darnold looked in the win that they had against the Jets and how good Jayden Daniels lost in their only loss this year, I'm taking Daniels.
And if you gave Jayden Daniels, Justin Jefferson, and Jordan Addison and that offensive line, that coach,
PJ
like
Hawkinson,
Aaron Jones, like that'd just be insane. That offense will be insane.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Next up, his competition for Rookie of the Year, Caleb Williams, who started to heat up here a little bit.
Definitely give me Jayden Daniels. I mean, I'll look up Caleb Williams' stats real quick, but I don't think that I'm going to see anything that's going to blow me away. Yeah, no. Definitely give me Jayden Daniels.
The ever non-mobile Kirk Cousins is up next.
Give me Jayden Daniels. Kirk has definitely improved throughout the year, but give me Jayden Daniels.
500-yard game doesn't sway you?
Nah.
In primetime Kirk Cousins?
You like that.
I do indeed like that. Next up, swagged up white boy Baker Mayfield.
Oh, that is tough. Granted, but you know what? Even in their loss to Atlanta, Baker still looked great. He had an incredible game in that loss to Atlanta. Where is it? Here we go.
Baker's good.
19 of 24 for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. To their loss to Denver, he was 25 of 33 for 163 yards and a touchdown, which isn't good. So I'll say Jayden Daniels, but that one is close. Baker has had a great season, and I'm really happy for him that he has.
Baker, he's so fun to root for, this version of Baker. Tampa Baker is so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
Next up, Jordan Love, off the injured list, and after having a Brett Favre game 2 weeks ago, and this week playing well enough against the Rams.
Yeah, give me Jayden Daniels. I'm still not a believer in Jordan Love. I'm really not. I think the jokes going around that he's a Toyotathon QB are hilarious.
They're so good.
But I mean, when we talked about it this offseason, I said, like, since when is a 9-game sample? The last time that a 9-game sample size was good enough to, as an organization, put that much into your quarterback was when the Colts drafted Anthony Richardson. And we've seen what that looks like so far. So definitely give me Jayden Daniels.
Next up, Brock Purdy and the Niners, man. Brock Purdy.
Yeah, and the Niners have been interesting this year.
they're playing this moment, and they're playing pretty well, beating Seattle, I believe. Let's just check up on that score for a moment.
Yeah. I mean, while you're looking that up, Brock Purdy has completed
Yeah.
65% of his passes, and he's thrown 6
Good.
touchdowns to 4 interceptions. It's not great. So definitely give me Jayden Daniels.
Nice. All righty. Next up, I really like this dude, Geno Smith. Perpetually underrated now.
Geno Smith is perpetually underrated. I'm really glad that the Lions won that game and that he didn't do it again.
Losing last week to the Giants, though.
That's tough.
The Giants.
Yeah, and so here's my thought with Geno Smith, and especially looking at these numbers here. I think that he is a yard merchant, but the scoring doesn't show up the same way the yards does, right? So like if you're looking at his games this year, 284, 395, 289, 327 in a 4-game stretch from New England to the Giants, their last 4 games. He's only thrown 4 touchdowns and he's thrown 3 interceptions in that time. Yeah. You know, so like I mean he is great. He finds his guys, he gets the yards, but the not leading it, not capping these drives off with touchdowns is concerning to me. So give me Jayden Daniels.
These last 4, I'd say, are the upper crust of the NFC right now, starting off with that Kyler Murray.
Give me Jayden Daniels.
Oh, man.
I mean,
the video games?
Murray has had a good year, and he's like low-key resurrecting his career this year so far. But also the team is 2-3. They have wins against San Francisco and the Rams, and then have losses to Washington, right? Kyler Murray got out-dueled by Jayden Daniels 42-14. So give me Jayden Daniels. It's not close.
Yep. Nice. Oh, man. Up here, we're going to have to test your resolve. Let's go with Dak Prescott first.
Oh, Dak Prescott. I'm definitely saying Jayden Daniels because I watched the entirety of the Steelers-Cowboys game, and outside of the final 3 minutes of the game, Dak Prescott looked awful.
Bad interceptions in that game. There were 2 horrid interceptions.
He's thrown this year, where are we at? Here we are. This year, 8 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's thrown for 1,400 yards, but he's only completing 65% of his passes. Like, it's not good.
And Dak Prescott, first quarterback ever to throw 2 interceptions in the same game on different days of the week.
It's incredible.
Sunday and Monday. These last 2, we're going to have to test your resolve here. Your lovely baby boy, Jared Goff and the Lions.
Oh, man. Okay.
Mobile, fast, young guys.
I'm giving it to Jayden Daniels.
Wow.
Part of it is that he is taking care of the ball better than Jared Goff. Granted, he only has 4 touchdowns. Daniels does through 5 games, which
a lot of rushing touchdowns though. So.
Yeah, a good number of rushing touchdowns. And you know, again, this is not like we talked about knocking a player down a peg because he's in a good situation. That shouldn't happen, but we should elevate a player for being really good in a bad situation, and that's what Jayden Daniels is doing. So give me Jayden Daniels.
And now the guy that we started off this podcast with, that will be Matthew Stafford.
Oh, boy. Matthew Stafford.
Old, grizzled Super Bowl champion, potential future Hall of Famer.
Who has thrown 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions this year. So give me Jayden Daniels.
Oh, my goodness. The lack of hesitation is crazy.
It's not a lack of hesitation. They have honestly about the same number of passing yards, and Jayden Daniels has won 4 games compared to Matthew Stafford's 1, and Jayden Daniels is taking care of the ball better than Matthew Stafford has. I mean, if we go wins, we go scoring and we go turnovers, Jayden Daniels is leading in all three of those categories.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. And leading what seems to be the most potent offense points-wise in NFL history, efficiency-wise. It's crazy. The numbers are
Greatest
insane.
show on turf 2.0.
Mm-hmm. With Terry McLaurin and De'Ami Brown and old Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson. Oh
yeah, because they traded Jahan Dotson to the Eagles. The Eagles still haven't used him. At the time, it was like, what are you doing? Why are you hurting your rookie quarterback so bad if you're the Commanders? And it's like, oh, well, all right, Eagles aren't using him. Maybe there's something that those teams know that we don't. But yeah, so.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Well, everybody, this has been awesome. Long episode, I know, but we enjoy talking. So we talked. It's been good. It's been real. Looking forward to seeing if any of our trades come to fruition. Certainly that Max Crosby to Detroit would get me so hype. It's not going to happen, but if it did, it would be unreal. I won't say it's not going to happen. It might happen. Unlikely, but it might. But anyway, and we need to see the Steelers go get a receiver.
Indeed, we do.
So thank you all so much for watching, for supporting us, and have a great week, everybody.
Have a good night.